You've all got ice cream and coffee, and good evening. Welcome to STE for this is okay. So we're back. I'm Bill Hogan. Eric's done his 2 years as president, and so he's working tonight. So next he'll be here next month. So we'll give him hell for only doing 2 years in a row. So Eddie, you want to pass the mic, and we'll industry events, and we'll go from there.
All right, guys, welcome back to STE after a good long hiatus. So now it's time to bring back the whole good tradition of passing the mic. If any news, any information, anything anyone wants to say, I'm gonna go around and ask if anyone wants to speak. Anyone at this table? You want to say anything? Any news? Anything about yourself? No instructions. Nothing. Yes. This table. Anyone? Any news? Any news? We're all just excited to be back. Anyone on this table? We need some entertainment. We need some, we need some noise. Here we go.
All right, guys. I am setting that down right there. So I want to thank everyone who came tonight. Super appreciate the STE program and everything that past members have done. George Hamilton, Howard, and our past president who couldn't make it tonight.
Bobby, your new secretary.
I'm just the secretary. Well, thanks, everyone. So it's great to see everyone. We've got a great program ahead of us with Keycode, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what 2110 and how that transition happens. All right, great. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Finally, someone broke the ice. We need someone else to break the ice. Come on, Glenn. What? You gotta say something.
Welcome to the 2023-2024 STE season. I have to admit that I, after a small hiatus, have taken on the senior. Can you remember? So when we were kids, STE, what is the age of the people at STE? It's somewhere between retired and dead. And now I'm the senior board member, along with, who's my other senior member? Bill Hogan. So I'm a senior board member, so I'm not yet retired, and I might be dead. I don't know. I'm dead to some people. But anyway, I just want to say welcome back. I've got a couple things that I have to admit I've made a deal with the devil. Is now the worldwide sales manager for Matrix Switch Corporation. So if you want small routers, if you don't want, it's either a 16 by 16 or a 32 or a 40 by 40. You got your pick. You can have a 16 by 16, a 32 or a 40 by 40. And you notice how it keeps cutting out because they don't want to hear my sales pitch. Don't forget, I'm the only salesman who ever was the president of the STE. Jerry, God rest your soul, love you. Didn't want me to say that. But again, so Piper Digital is now the worldwide sales manager for Matrix Switch Corporation. And don't forget, if you need like 4x4 or a 4x2 or an 8x4 or a 16x4 or and we make the routers. 8x8, we're going to In and Out for a big hamburger.
Perfect. Thank you, Glenn.
There you go.
For that.
I don't know about you guys, but when I heard 4x2 and 4x4, I'm thinking lumber, not switches. So So I'm Belinda from Pixit Media, and my hiatus from STE has been a little bit longer than Glenn's has, but I'm really glad to be back. And thank you.
We love Belinda.
And I want to give a shout out to Will from Grass Valley, because Grass Valley has just assigned Pixit Media as the storage of choice for the Grass Valley product. We are the K2 end of life replacement, as well as the OEM. They're giving up their OEM licenses with Isilon and Quantum, I believe it is. And they've said they want to go totally with Pixit. So if anybody has Grass Valley and their end of life, give me a shout.
Perfect. Thank you. All right, Mr. The sales will be rockets.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Belinda, for the nice introduction and the announcement about our with Pixit. But yes, so just wanted to introduce, I recently joined Grass Valley at the beginning of this year. Very good friends with Mike and the rest of the Keycode family here as well. So was excited to come out and hear it. So if you guys need anything Grass Valley, or if you need someone to figure out what's going on with your support ticket item, I'm your guy. This is also Kevin over here from our LA team. Obviously, you know, Grass Valley has gone through a lot in the last couple of years, and we're excited where we're at right now, to say the least. And you know, but we're a lot of good things on the horizon for us, and looking forward to talking to you all later on. So thank you.
I just wanted to get a quick survey. I just noticed at my table that I was the only person that had salmon. I'm feeling very good about that right now. Everybody else had steak. And I wanted to know if everybody else was in the same situation, or was I the only person with salmon? I also ate Will's ice cream and Matt's ice cream. They didn't notice that. And all the bread at the table. But I still feel very good about myself that I got the salmon. So did anybody else eat salmon, or am I? All right. Thank you. The salmon people. Just wanted to get a quick survey.
Cool. Anyone else? Oh, of course. Mr. Jeff.
All right, I just wanted to say thank you to Bill Hogan. We had not many volunteers to take on the STE president role. And it is challenging, but I'll tell you the most challenging thing about the president role is setting up the presentations. So to all of you, if you have ideas or contacts, or you want to do a presentation yourself for one of these meetings, please reach out to any of us at STE. What is it? info@ste-ca.org. Got to go to the president for these things. I was president, but I forgot that was a couple of years back. Had a few tequila shots since then. So thank you all for showing up. Thank you, Keycode and presenters, for volunteering for this presentation tonight, which is going to be awesome, as you can see. And I will hand the mic off. So anyone else but Paul Carey want to take the mic? Glenn, do you have any death stories for us? Yeah, it's okay. That's not good enough.
Thank you. Was speaking with Bill, was in the desert for a week in show site. One of the things I can wrong show. That was a previous show. But one of the things I do at the site is that I had built the last Crawford generator that came out of MQ in 2006 that might be of interest to you guys, because it is 113 kVA alternator, but 100 horsepower motor. So it comes out of regulation at about 166 amps per leg, 500 amps, but it's able to, for the audio guys, I can power handily 100,000 watt audio stack with it because of the peak to the average thing. Between the flywheel and the big marathon alternator and whatnot, it passes peaks like you wouldn't believe. But what that it does, and it hasn't been used in a while, in a decade, to do this, if you've got an integration job for 50 hertz power at any voltage between 250 and whatever, there's a 20 turn analog pot on the thing that can set 50 hertz and hold it in as 1 part in 5,000. It'll maintain it at 1 part in 5,000, and you can set the voltage anything you want for it. So the other announcement is I finally decided to protect my house, and the company Reloserve is now LLC. So I couldn't make this announcement about putting the generator out to anything but family until things were taken care of. But if you have a need for 50 hertz power at any voltage, it's a base camper. It runs 5 days. At 150 amps, it'll run for 5 days without fueling. It sits on a 150-gallon gas tank. So if you got a project that needs 50 cycle AC at any voltage, give me a buzz.
And if there's an earthquake, call. If there's an earthquake, call Paul. That's the answer. Without further ado, Mike Cavanaugh, president, founder, 22 years at Keycode here in Burbank, and
wonderful. Anyway, thank you for having us. It's really good to see everybody. John Svetlik called us 2 weeks ago and said, "Hey, would you guys be willing to do a presentation? Our main speaker fell out." So absolutely. And then marketing said, "But we got 3 other events going on this week." I don't know, Mike. No, we're doing it. So anyway, we're here. I'm Mike Cavanaugh. I am the founder, president of Keycode Media. And
happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear mine. Happy birthday to you.
Thank you. And after 9/11 happened, literally 10 days before, John Svetlik and I were working together, and the first year was insane. So glad we survived, and we're glad we're here. So anyway, we have Jason Beard, who just moved from Houston. He was running the mission control of Fox out of Houston, effectively. And online, we have Steve Dupaix, who you may have known from product management for Imagine Communications or Grass Valley. And he's been involved in some very detailed engineering. So we wanted to have him on the presentation, so he's going to go pretty deep. And we're glad to be here. So from an agenda level, we're going to talk about the real world and the experiences we've had working with clients who've said, we may want to go all IP. Can we? And how we got them there and what we went through and sort of what's working, what isn't, and all the issues from specs that people publish to things that don't work. And we're going to take you on that journey. It's a total of 23 slides, and I'm only doing 2 more. So just at a high level, on the infomercial slide is the company started all post-production. We sold Avid. But times have changed, and we really diversified, where we have 10 offices across the US. 40% of our business is broadcast, 40% post, and 20% IP in AV. And what drove everything was really digital signals and being able to connect digital across the network to allow people to communicate more effectively. And it's been a heck of a run. We're having a lot of fun. One thing, in general that people may not know, we have now 175 employees. We are the sole that I'm aware of ETP center, and we train people on Blackmagic, Adobe, and Avid at school and online, and we have ETP funding. So if your organization is looking for training, even customized type things, we build curriculum, and the state of California will pay for it for you or for your company. So we cover over 400 product lines, 7,000 clients nationwide, doing a lot of cloud-based projects as well. We migrated our entire enterprise into the cloud, ERP, CRMs, phones, the whole 9 yards, which if we hadn't done that, I do not think we would have survived the COVID shutdown. And we're really looking forward to chatting with you tonight. And so from this level, what I'd like to do is introduce Steve and have him talk a little bit about the background of SMPTE 2110 and what we've gone through, and hand it off to Steve. So Steve.
Thanks, Mike. So this is kind of an interesting story, and I hope it's okay if I share this with you. The beginning is always a delicate time, and anybody that can guess what that is from, yeah, Virginia Madsen, the original production of Dune. There was a time about a decade ago where a lot of the industry participants and others, members of the VSF, were gathered together in a room at CNN's headquarters in Atlanta. And Brad Gilmer, the executive director of VSF and AMWA, stood up and said to everybody, stop. At that time, Grass Valley was developing a new technology under my team. Everts was developing new technology for transport under their stuff. And there was a lot of confusion that was going on. And he said, before we go into new technology, you guys start selling us a whole bunch of new gear, we need to take a look at what the real problems in the industry are and figure out what we need to solve, and then see what we can solve first, and what technology would be best to do that. So out of that came a kind of a setup to do what's called the Joint Task Force on Network Media. And its key objectives were to collect user requirements, to identify gaps in technology, to then help manage transitions to the correct technology, which was obviously selected as IP, and then to recommend best practices and to coordinate industry activity in bringing these new technologies to the fore. This is what kind of drove towards the formation of the SMPTE 2110 committee. And there are many of you guys in the room who probably had something to do with that, or maybe even there were some that attended that meeting. The cool part about this is that for the first time in a long time, lots of participants in the industry got together and we shared ideas, and we created a powerful working group that brought the industry forward. What that has led to is the ability to now have technology that covers a broad spectrum of the gear, is moving forward, that is using a common protocol in a lot of cases under the NMOS flag, and is taking us forward into a new technological domain that reduces costs, that increases flexibility, scalability of our systems, and has a bright future for the broadcast television industry. From this experience, let's go to the next slide. We'll talk a little bit about a use case that we're involved with right now. We were one of a number of companies that were requested to bid on a project to rebuild a new station for KMGH, a script station in Denver, Colorado. And this station, this is the first time that they had built a new scripts that built a new station, and they had some key requirements. And I'm just going to share a few of those with you here. If you go to the next slide. So the idea was that they needed to start from the ground up, build a whole new television station infrastructure. They had sold the building that they owned in Denver, and were actually leasing it back while they got all this organized. And they wanted to have a brand new infrastructure that used the latest technology, but they had to make it fit within a budget. And that's always the challenge is when you're used to kind of leveraging what has already been in there for 10, 15, some of the gear that's in there is over 25 years old. Some of the early SDI stuff, you're not really used to spending a lot of money. So the budget was kind of tight. They needed to have 3 full studios with PCRs. They needed to have the equivalent IO capability of a 384 by 340 router. They need to have an expanded multi-view capability. They needed to move from 720 to 1080p. So lots of things that needed to change and move forward. They also don't want to get locked into an infrastructure that limited them to just a 1080p or 3 gig infrastructure. They wanted to be able to, in the future, expand. So obviously they were looking at 2110. the key was that we had to identify what those costs were going to be, what it would look like, and not just the cost of the core of the equipment, but what it was going to take to integrate it, what it was going to take to train their people on operating it, and what it was going to take to have the long-term maintenance, all the SLAs to have the thing run going forward. So lots of things had to come together. And they also had some ideas that, they had all these disparate control platforms and things that they operated, and they did a lot of customization, if you will, on the fly based on what the general manager wanted to do in the station. And they didn't want to lose that capability by going to a very rigid system or series of systems that would limit what they could do going forward. So it was kind of an exciting opportunity for us to take a look at what they wanted to try and accomplish, what technologies were out there, and to present those to them. So let's go to the next slide. One of the key things that came up quickly was what they were going to do for cameras. They had a cadre of existing Sony cameras. They didn't want to necessarily change all those out, but they wanted the next generation of cameras. And they were unsure as to how they could leverage the older stuff with the new stuff. And during one of our key technology presentations, and we did something that is kind of proprietary to us, that comes from my product management days, where we built what's called rubrics, a list of questions, technical nature and other things that we would ask each vendor in a presentation to go through with the customer. And the vendor didn't have those. Can you guys still hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, it just got real quiet on my side. So one of the things that happened with this is Sony presented this new interface that they had to their cameras. And it's kind of shown here on the right. It's the TX30 interface that takes SMPTE cable in from the camera, but it acts as a gateway that then puts everything back out via fiber and makes it so that you don't have to have a separate CCU back in the engine room. It also means that if you put the TX30 in the studio, you have the flexibility of moving things around, reorienting, redesigning your set however you need to without having to redo where your cable connections are. It gives you a lot more flexibility. As we presented this to the customer and we went through this rubric process, it knocked out all the other camera manufacturers because it gave them the greatest flexibility to use what they already had in an SDI world, add new cameras that had 4K capabilities, and have the flexibility to adjust their studios as needed going forward. So just one example of what 2110 is able to do by providing an opportunity to aggregate a lot of other signals. It's kind of interesting because one of the things that happened not too long ago with one of our engineers is he was looking at things. We were trying to solve a problem with an expensive prompting system, and their 2110 interface was rather expensive. And we said, man, if we could just do it in SDI, we could save a whole bunch of money. Well, lo and behold, right there on the TX30 is an interface, SDI interface to tie in the prompting. So we got rid of all the expensive 2110 interfaces for the prompting and used the TX30 as the gateway to get all the prompting signals out to the camera. So just an example of how there are trade-offs, and sometimes you can use older technology with newer technology and make it all come together. And kudos to Sony for having that kind of solution. Let's go to the next slide. One of the other key considerations in a facility is how you're going to get different signals around. Does it make sense? I mean, we all know that the UDP signals run over 3 gig or 12 gig fiber or copper work very well. They're very predictable. So the standard SDI interfaces are all well known and well behaved, but the cable becomes a problem. And adding cable, changing cable, bending cable, having things happen to the cable is all problematic. And one of the things that we discovered from other installs is that while there are specs out there for what the cables are supposed to do, they don't always do that. So Jason, why don't you tell us a little bit about what we found with, or Mike, with some of the cable lengths in one of our other installs.
So pre-flood Texas, we had a facility, Austin PBS, and we basically took SMPTE spec on all design, and the CTO, Chris Ostertag, was saying, want everything to be 12G. And so we're like, great, measure out the distances, provide all the architecture, because we ran some of the cables and then they hired a local cable company to pull a lot. And the pathway problem became problematic. We were having problems with signal. So first we said anything beyond, I think it was 500 feet, we're not liable for because we made a specification in the design not to go beyond there. And we started testing the ones that were under 500 feet, and we're still having problems with the 12G signal. And we found out, and this is the data on between the Belden cables and also the Canary, was literally we were ranging from 66 to 72% of actual performance as according to what the SMPTE spec was. And this was, you know, real life, straight from the camera, all the way down to AJA, Marshall, the Telestream converters, and different switchers that they had. And we weren't getting the performance that we expected. So we called up, at the time we had one of the SMPTE executives on our team, and we called him up and said, hey, can you talk to everyone at SMPTE on the standards level and tell us why this is happening? And they came back a week later and said, well, our SMPTE specs are basically just published what the manufacturers tell us. And we went in the Belden, because it was a Belden facility, and we said, we're not getting the performance that your specs are saying that you submitted to SMPTE. And it became a bit of a pissing match, for lack of a better word. But, you know, ultimately, you know, they did some friends and family to fix it and make it good. But we had to change a lot of this to fiber because the SMPTE spec did not perform in a 12G environment as specified from SMPTE.
And that's actually one of my favorite stories, because that's what we found when I was working at Grass with routers when we introduced our 3 gig solutions, is that the cable specs were way off. In fact, Belden was desperate because it looked like 1694A was going to die at 3 gig. We came up with some clever circuitry and kind of solved the problem. That's still somewhat proprietary to their designs. But we were able to go from about 70 to 80 meters to 160 verified by a company, a testing company out of Germany. That helped to usher in the next generation of 3 gig infrastructures. But there's some real problems as you go up in data rates with VSWR and jitter and all those kinds of things, signal degradation, that wipes it out. So in taking a look at the cost of putting in a 12 gig infrastructure, a 3 gig infrastructure, and this is should be at the next slide coming up, we took a look at what we call the total cost of ownership of a 2110 facility, a 2110 facility with redundancy, 2110 with a mixture of 3 gig, 3 gig versus 12 gig versus 2110. And I don't know, it looks like on the presentation, the slides are now upside down. Not sure how that happened. But the net of taking a look at this and including the cost of training staff on new technology, making sure that we accounted for any of the translation devices, any of the on and off ramps, the gateways, all that kind of stuff, integrating a different kind of control system that would also operate with the fabric of an IP network, making sure all that meshed together, which is really kind of expensive in the 2110 domain. But we showed them, as you can see here, that the total cost of ownership on a 2110 fabric was actually less than what it would be on a 3 gig infrastructure. And as a result of showing them this type of layout, we were able to help them to make the decision to go with 2110. Now, if it had been a migration plan, this may have looked a little bit differently. And we've kind of discovered that there's some breaking points. If it's going to be about 30% 30% 2110, 70% SDI, you're going to pay more money. If you're going to be 70% 2110, 30% SDI, you will actually hit the break-even point or start to save money. If you're able to go the majority of it as 2110, that's where the real savings comes. And that's getting better and better as products evolve, as manufacturers develop other techniques to help that go, and as the IP switch manufacturers come more to the table to help make the products more affordable in our industry. The cool part is the technology is also advancing to the point where now we can have system-wide control from a common platform. And we were able to evaluate a number of different companies from Sony/Nevion to Labo to EVS to Imagine, and present to the customer options again through this rubric selection process to show them that there are options out there as to what works best and what might not work best, and present them with an option of cost versus total cost of ownership versus benefit, and help them to make those kinds of decisions for which they're incredibly grateful. So this is kind of the beginning of where we went with 2110 for this facility. I think we're going to jump now to kind of what all those standards are, what it looks like, and then we can kind of bring this back together as to how the vetting process happened to select the actual products that are going into this facility. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jason Beard to talk a little bit about the IP video standards.
Well, can you guys hear me? So that's good. Over the past few years, the transition from SDI to IP, there's been a number of different companies putting together different technology and protocols. And, you know, at first glance, you might think, okay, they're competing. But what I've observed through application is there are specific use cases for them. And then we're also starting to see that there are products becoming available on the market that is going to allow you to connect them. And one of the things that let me start with 2110. 2110, if you guys are familiar with that, for the most part, you're seeing 2110 deployed in infrastructure with large pieces connected to it. And it's allowing transport of high bandwidth, uncompressed, compressed essences, ancillary data around the network in a way that's easily controlled. Various vendors now have control systems. NMOS is the standard that seems like everybody's trying to adopt. But within 2110, you have your essences broken out by video that's compressed, video that's uncompressed. You have standards for redundancy. You have standards for where you're keeping your captioning, your SCSI data, and those type of things. Well, before I get into, let me slide back over to this frame. We're talking about Dante, NDI, SRT. So I might actually have a better frame, better one for that. Let me see real quick. No, we'll get over there yet. Huh? Yeah, because I'm talking about it. Sorry about that. Yeah.
Presentation's over.
Yeah, we'll go back, but I just thought I should bring this up. NDI is a really useful technology. It's been out for a while, and it's actually maturing. One of my favorite things about it is how easy it is to throw together a production. This is an example of a IP technology that's more use case driven, production type driven. You're going to start seeing more and more of this. It's really cool stuff. You have use cases where you need to combine your infrastructure. You know, you might have a broadcast house into, you know, your production. There are gateways and touch points now that will allow you to get NDI into 2110 and back. One of the cool examples is Dante. Dante is, you know, been around for a while for audio. There's been a lot of development there, but with the addition to AES-67, AES-67 easily translates into 2110. It makes a really good gateway for getting audio around. One of the other cool things that Dante's come out with this year is Dante AV, which I think is great for presentations, maybe concerts type venue things where you need to be able to route your audio or your video onto displays along with the audio. There's some really cool stuff with that. I don't think it's dynamic as 2110 with the control system, so it's more use case or workflow built. And then the SRT, RST, and RTMP is just some of those things have been around for a while. Some of you guys might be familiar with for transport. The other thing to mention about NDI, with the new NDI gateway that's just come out, you can now get NDI over the WAN. So if you have two sites you need to interconnect, there's a product out now for that. And I'm not trying to sell new tech products. I'm just, you know. All
You
right,
know,
so-
Jason, I think there's a really good point to make there, and that is that there's a lot of different tools in the tool chest to address unique solutions and problems that that are out there, and you don't have to just go 2110 with everything.
Right.
As I was pointing out, there's some breakpoints for staying with 3 gig versus 2110. One of the key things, though, that I want to point out here that is limiting some of the existing standards or other ways of doing this is in fact the control platform. There are so many different protocols out there for everybody's gear, and trying to unify that so that the operator doesn't have to have a bunch of different control surfaces or interfaces and trying to sort all that out. Unified control platforms are kind of the thing to have. And as we looked at what was really needed for KMGH in their new facility, that's one of the things they wanted to get rid of. Is we did a study, and the producers and directors have between 9 and 12 different control surfaces in front of them trying to run their shows. And the idea was to consolidate that down as much as possible into just 3 or 4. There are new platforms that are out there now on the control side using NMOS plus tie-ins to existing protocols are enabling that unification of control across a broader range of gear that we haven't been able to accomplish with solutions as like NDI, SRT, Arist, or Dante, because they are so specific to one particular signal type, whether it's video, whether it's audio, whether it's a streaming H.264 compressed signal. By having a uniform standard of command and control, we're able to unify a lot more stuff together under 2110.
Yeah. Just to add to that on the standards, if you guys want to get familiar with it, there's a couple of good resources to go where you can get some free education. New Tech has they call it New Tech University Style Viz. You can learn everything you need to know about NDI. Dante, you could go to the Audinate Dante website. They have certifications. You can take those, learn everything you can, and they thoroughly cover multicast. And multicast is really important to all these technologies. I think once you've got a good grasp of multicast technology over IP, it's going to really lay a foundation to understanding how all these work. The other key is PTP. Got to get a good understanding of PTP. It's how they all synchronize. Oh yeah, so on this slide, we've got a couple of slides with various products. So covering more and more and doing more and more integrations with the various products. Mike wants to talk.
So where if you want to have 2110 work, it's like, well, what products work with 2110? And that was really a limiting factor, especially when the decisions were being made, last year, looking at an NAB, evaluating, and, first it comes down to cameras. And there's like, I don't know, 5. Grass Valley has 3 of them. Panasonic has 1 PTZ, the UE 160, and now they have a backplane converter for their 3900. Sony doesn't have a SMPTE 2110 camera yet. Ross is really just walking into 2110 right now. Grass Valley's adopted it a little bit more, but there's a lot of gaps in that space of, well, if we're going to go 2110, what can we plug in that actually works with 2110? Because once you start adding, converters in the entire process, it gets real expensive. So that's probably the biggest aspect around it. And that's really the evolution that I think over the next 2 years, we're going to see dramatic changes as everything goes purely IP.
That's exactly right, Mike. And one of the key ones that we actually changed midstream was, instead of using an XVS switcher, Sony introduced a new MLS switcher that is 2110 native, doesn't have to have conversion cards inside the frame. And because of the integration that we could accomplish with it, the cost savings that we could see, and the scalability that that switcher had, we actually canceled the order for the XVS 7000 that we were going to get for KMGH and switched them to the new MLS. That would not have been possible if we did not have a 2110 infrastructure. And at that moment, Andy Rylance, the DOE at KMGH, says, this is the magic of this new standard 2110, is that I had the scalability from the IP switches. I had flexibility to use lots of different people's products, but the ability to quickly change direction on product because of a new technology or a new capability that came out was absolutely phenomenal. There's something else that's kind of interesting here, and I think we have a QR code to the links to this down the road. Part of what we were talking about there, the first with the JT&M, is that they actually test everybody's gear that's willing to come to one of these plug fests and have their products evaluated. And there's two different tests that go on. There's the hardware test where you interface with all the other products that are out there to create a complete hardware workflow. And then there's a software control element under NMOS to make sure that your products can be controlled adequately against NMOS. And this eye chart that you kind of see behind indicates whose products have what capabilities and where they stand. You have never seen a chart like this before JT&M was formed a decade ago, to have all manufacturers that are participating in this lay their gear out in the open and see plainly where their strengths are and where their weaknesses are. And that helps to make those kinds of critical decisions. Jason?
All right, so during some of the work that we've done recently, we have identified some gaps when trying to find solutions for some of the issues. One of them, and this was Steve brought it up, trying to find 2110 native cameras. There's not a lot out on the market. There are some. We're expecting to see more coming along. PTZ cameras. I will say we're starting to see a lot with NDI, not a lot with 2110 at this point. So prompting was put on the list, but after some discussion today, we found that there's actually a couple of prompting vendors who recently announced 2110 capable prompting. Now I don't know the vendor, so I didn't provide that on here, but that's an example of product continuing to come to market. We did run into some challenges on how are we going to deal with closed caption insertion and SCUDdy insertion in a 2110-40 world. And 2110-40 is basically, it's the ancillary data like picked out in its own stream or flow. That's the terminology that they use. And where we've had some use cases where we needed to do some SCUDdy insertion, there hasn't been standalone product, whether it be a virtual machine or some kind of appliance that would take the 2110-40 stream, do the insertion, and then out comes the 2110-40 with the completed ancillary data. The products that we've been seeing thus far have been like complete channel in a box. Like, for example, you guys are familiar with Imagine's Versio playout platform. It's got everything in it. Includes 2110-40 processing, but you have to get everything else with it. So what we had to do to solve for this, at least at this point, is use a gateway, take it out the SDI, and do the insertion either with an Evertz or a Cobalt ancillary inserter, and then bring it back in as 2110. Not ideal, but it's just an example of some of the little things that you're going to deal with as the technology matures.
There's an interesting corollary to that as well, Jason. I sat in on a presentation from a probing company, Providius, the other day, and because they are taking apart the 2110 signal and can understand quite well how to look for frozen frames, for missing video, missing audio, missing ancillary data. they said, well, we can parse all that. We can also keep track of some stuff and put it all back together. And it's it's cheaper to do it with the SDI gateway solution that Jason just talked about, but these probing companies now have the ability to manage the ancillary data for us in kind of a native IP domain on a server. So it kind of shows you that there's gaps, but there's different ways of skinning the cat because of the type of data architecture that we're using with the TCP/IP backbone.
Before you go on to the next one, if you're not familiar with the product, there's a few out there. Ross makes one, Grass makes one, Evers makes one. What else? Basically, we just call them gateways, and they could be as simple as a single channel SDI to 2110 or back the other way. Really good throwdown for when you need to do a quick conversion. I wouldn't say they're cheap. Not if you have to buy a lot of them, but if you're doing a real quick, I need to solve this problem, those work really well. And then before you continue, just one more thing. Another gap that we found is a utility for time of day burn-in. Now, we'll say that there's products that'll do it. Like, for example, you could do it in tag, but you're creating a mosaic just to create your time of day burn-in slide. So it's not really a good solution. So we are interested in a 2110 only solution for this stuff. The checklist.
So we've got to kind of give you, oh, Mike, do you want to take this one?
We created a free blog and you can scan it. Is this the last slide or? And so more than anything else, we went through it learning the hard way, and love to hear any questions. I think that's what Q&A time is.
Yeah, you have some sample questions, but you have questions in the room.
And we have the checklist also, right?
Yeah. So if you guys scan you'll get access to basically how to the checklist of things you can go over before migrating baseband.
And we have it there on the next slide, right?
Yeah, we actually have.
Yeah, why don't we just put it for them? So we put together an eye test for you, but we really just went through everything from, what's the current infrastructure, what's the concept of the future workflow, the bandwidth and network evaluation, quality of service considerations, timing and synchronization, redundancy, failover planning, interop and compatibility, training, skill development, system monitoring, management, and budget and timeline. We just give it away for free. It's Keycode love. 22 years of Keycode love.
Marketing guy.
Yeah, the marketing guy wrote it, but it's real. He had it vetted by engineers. So that's overall what we have. Steve's on the line. He really can go deep, and as well can Jason on any Q&A, but we appreciate. Hope you found this of interest and helpful for you. And thank you for your time.
So how did you decide what your core switch was going to be? Did you use a purpose-built like Evertz type of switch, or what was behind that?
We actually did a lot of deep diving with Arista and Cisco to see who could come up with the best architectures, and we did the same type of what we call affectionately the rubric. It's just a series of questions that the vendor has to answer, and that kind of proves out who's got the right capabilities, who's got the right pricing, who's got the right total cost of ownership, and let the customer make that decision. But it was rigorous.
Decision was Arista, but it took like 100 years to get it delivered. So we're still waiting on that. Fingers are crossed.
No, it's delivered.
It'll be live, what, end of Q1?
Yes.
And we're in the midst of building a broadcast station. So next question.
I have noticed that in this whole list of different vendors who 2110 capables, one small little company was missing, Evertz. Can you elaborate why?
Evertz isn't really missing. There, and I can't say too much about it in terms of the KMGH Scripps station activity, but Evertz has 2110 compliant stuff, but and I hope I'm not offending any Evertz salespeople or colleagues that are in the audience. They kind of have an approach that
They can't get to you.
isolates other people out of the solution. I don't want to say it too directly, but it's kind of like they sometimes have a hard time playing nicely with others. Evertz makes fantastic products. If you use their whole suite of solutions, you're going to have a great solution. It will work well, but the flexibility that this particular client was looking for didn't fit well with the way Evertz approaches their system solutions.
How's that for politics?
Good job. What did you do for monitoring to do your QCing and checking out? Can you elaborate a little bit on that part?
So there's a number of different tools that are built into the existing solutions from Imagine, from Tag on the multi-viewer side, but the primary tools are Telestream and Fabrics. And the same kind of vetting process there to validate that they were going to be able to do the correct kind of probing, give us the correct kind of feedback. And one of the other key things that I mentioned was that they would interface well with the control platform that was selected. And the control platform that was selected in this case was EBS. Although I got to tell you, you need to look at the Nevion solution. Lavo is fantastic, and Imagine's iPath is really coming on strong.
Yep. Yep.
My question is more along the lines of the business model for the customer in seeing that many of these types of products now I see are subscription based versus a one-time sale. How does Keycode fit into that model when Scripps being the end user now is burdened with a subscription versus a one-time purchase or something that's modular that requires a subscription? And does that continue to run through Keycode, or does that become a relationship between the vendor and the customer, the manufacturer and the customer at the end?
Since my boss is in the room, I'll be very direct. It still runs through Keycode. One of the key things we did is, and that's why I keep talking about this total cost of ownership, is we looked at a 3-year and had an option at a 5-year SLA from all the vendors so that we could give the customer a look at what the cost of ownership was going to be like. So in that rolled up number, it includes 3 years or 5 years of SLA, training and support, firmware, software upgrades, all that kind of stuff rolled up together. And we also asked the vendors to come to the table and bring their best pricing and their best approach to it. Some of them literally gave away 3 years worth of SLAs to win the business. So by having that total cost of ownership approach, we actually saved the customer a tremendous amount of money, got them a better solution as a result. But we would prefer the customer to stay with us, and we offer something called Keycode Total Care, KTC, that we offer the customer so that we can stay involved in their solution for as long as they want to keep partnering with us. And of course, our objective is to take good enough care of them that they want to stay with us, and then we roll the SLAs underneath that operation.
And part of this arrangement with the client was they had the option to go direct if they so chose. So we really had a level for them to make that decision. But generally in subscription, we deal with it a lot more post-production based products. A lot of it is, we're now hinged with being frontline support for those vendors. So And we don't make enough on the subscription to really do it. So we send it all to the Phil. Nope, didn't say that. But it's always being competitive and having value. And when you don't have value, you have no place in the world for that transaction. And we're very cognizant and mature and aware about that.
I'm going to keep going as long as anybody wants to, but question for Steve is in terms of precision time and Genlock, and if you've done that as analog, blackburst, traditional, and also how predictable is audio delays in lip sync? Because did some consulting and it's the video is predictable, the audio isn't.
Well, that's one of the interesting things about going with a 2110 -30 solution, where you're using the AES67 standard. There's an older version that's kind of rolled into 2110. Is it behaves a lot better with PTP timing in that regard. We spent a lot of time, and I hope I'm not telling too many stories out of school here. There was a real toss-up between staying with CalRec, which is who they currently had, and going to something new like Lavo. And the two things that really made the decision for them, other than cost, was that the Lavo solution could be headless. You didn't have to buy a hardware console to operate the system. And the other thing was that they utilized the native 2110 AES version, so that the timing would stay far more accurate. You wouldn't have those kinds of issues. And so keeping things in band, keeping things in the same domains helps to eliminate those kinds of extraneous delays. Now, there's certainly ways that others can do that using Dante. There's some very elegant solutions out there, but one of the key things we saw was that the audio industry, the audiophiles, they kind of want to have their own domain. And in a television station today, that doesn't work so well, because the engineer has to be able to handle the video, the audio, the multi-viewing, the prompting, and now the networking. They don't have the staff available to have dedicated audio guys that can troubleshoot all the little audio timing issues or other problems. So having that unified and having it work in an architecture that's easy to monitor, troubleshoot, have the right kinds of probes on, makes a world of difference to the overall cost of the system.
If there's no other questions, Matt and Mike and Jason will be around, and Keycode is just up the street. So there's get all your stuff off the QR code. Thank you for Keycode and everybody, and see you next month.
Thank you.